it'll be fun. It'll be fun. I mean, you'll enjoy it. I mean, you saw, it's sort of really loose when I talked there. This is a little tighter and a little bit, I hope, a little tighter.
Oh, it was great. It was great.
Yeah.
I cannot wait. I'm gonna go check the works.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Should we go see what it looks like at the door?
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Nice, you ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Ready to go.
Hi, everybody. Hi, my name is Stuart Copeland. I'm the director of the Arts Lab, which you're inside of. This is the Arts Lab, and tonight's a really exciting night because we've got August Muth here. I was lucky enough to get to go visit August's studio with Mary Songus last year. And had my mind blown completely. And when August agreed to give a talk, I was really thrilled. But I was also like, man, how are we going to capture like how incredible it is, like the experience of being in a studio? And he's just gone above and beyond to put together such an incredible talk. I'm really thrilled to get to see it. I'm really, I don't know, so grateful he wants to share it with us here at UNM. So this is part of the Gale Memorial Lecture Series. This is something I'm in charge of this year. This is our second Gale talk. We've got a bunch more talks coming up in the future, on top of a bunch of other great guest speakers. Next week is Brian Konevsky. Week after that, we have Neil Mendoza, I'm pretty sure. He might be in the audience right now. So please keep on coming back to the lab and checking out our great artist speakers. If you need to use the restroom, it's down the hallway. If you have any questions, come talk to me afterwards. But maybe we should clap for August now.
Well, it's really nice to be here tonight. I want to thank, of course, UNM Arts Lab for the invitation, Mary Songus and Stuart Copeland and Valerie Estabrook, who really helped me put together this talk, and so it was really great. This journey in light for me really began with my very first memory. I was probably 4 or 5 years old, and I was laying I was at the tennis club of Albuquerque, and I was laying next to the baby pool, and this rainbow formed over, off to one side, and it was like this amazing memory I have, and I just was amazed at this rainbow in the sky because I had never really understood it, never really seen it before. And I got into the water, and I was opening my eyes underneath the water and looking at the rainbow because I was a very water person from very, very early. And that sort of began the whole story. And so, as I was going through middle school and things like that, I became very interested in science and looked further and further into it. And at one point in time, I started making these sort of stained glass forms that I would fill with water, and they sort of acted as large prisms. And I used to take it outside when I was in my 15, 16 years old and shine big spectrums onto the garage door at my house. And, it was like, I was really a maker. I liked to make things when I was a kid. And so that's how this all started. Got into making jewelry, started working with opals and light. And that was always the major attraction, was light to me. And moved to New York City, and that's where I saw my first hologram. And it sort of changed my life because it was like this amazing magical thing that had all the colors that I was interested in, and I could sculpt. And at that point I had been making jewelry, and And so I was doing a lot of lost wax casting, very sculptural things. And so we'll see some of that a little later on in the slideshow. So let's move forward. So this is this is part of the Halo series, and it is an installation I did a number of years ago at Gerald Peters Gallery, and I'm using fiber optics, and it's a part of the Halo series, which is really based upon different optical effects that occur in the atmosphere. And so this is a photograph, obviously taken high mountain area, and this was one exposure, and these were all of these types of optical effects that were taking place in the atmosphere at the same time. And you know, the atmosphere can act like a huge lens that surrounds the planet, and so you get all of these things, and they're always often in curves or circles, and you know, like a rainbow really is a circle, but we only see half of it because of the landscape. But you know, in its real form, it is a halo. It's a circle of light, and you know, you can see that with a hose and spray water into the air and sort of figure out, get the right angle, and then all of a sudden you will see the entire ring of light. So this is light in one sense, just a small area of the electromagnetic spectrum. So, you know, there's visible right there. And this is all the rest. And these are just waveforms that exist in our environment. And they're just tighter waveforms, shorter things, X-rays, gamma rays, they're all very, very small. Then we get into light waves, which are right here. And this goes into heat, right here, infrared, radar, and longer wavelengths. Just a short little note, I was just reading about gravity waves the other day, and they were saying in this article that maybe gravity waves are the dimension of the universe. And so they're huge waves, and they were actually measured with a laser. So it's a very interesting process. So here's laser light right here. And laser light is a very special type of light. It's single frequency, and it's coherent in a beam. It doesn't spread. You know, I often hear the term laser focus. Well, lasers don't focus. They're collimated light, and they're coherent light. And so it makes more sense, actually, in a way, to really talk about laser light as a coherent thought than a focused thought, because it will extend through time. A focus is a point where the light will expand after that. So that's just a little thing that I've experienced in the language where people really don't understand what laser light is, what light is in general. So you know, basically light usually just disperses from the point of origin. And so that's with a flashlight, that's what it's doing. Laser light is very controlled. So these little demonstrations here really are talking about what laser light is doing. And so this right here is a variation on an experiment called the double slit experiment. And this laser is going through a human hair. It is horizontal across this little area. And so the light hits that human hair, and then you would think that all it would do was create a little shadow of that hair in the laser beam. But that's not what happens. What happens is the laser light hits that hair and starts to slightly move around the hair and refract and bend, and it starts to interact with itself. So what happens is you get all of these interactions of light waves that are coming off of this hair. And each area where it's light, the laser light is a really regular waveform. And each area where it's light, as the laser light is interacting with itself, the peak of the laser light lines up with itself, so it sort of amplifies it. And then as that laser light moves off axis a little bit and opposes it, where you've got a peak and a valley, it cancels the light out. So this is basically the laser light being on and off in space as it moves through past this hair. And so this is really proving that laser light or light acts as a wave, whereas it's always it also acts, light also acts as a particle too, which is a debate. But for the purpose of holography, it really acts as a wave, and this sort of shows that it's a wave because those light waves are interacting and phasing themselves in and out as it moves through space. Laser light also has sort of an interesting effect. It's really hard to see from back there, but if you later on you can come up and get a little close to this, and it sort of has a texture on it when you look at the light. And what's happening is this light, since it's single frequency, some of it is coming off of this card and coming into your eye, and as it comes into your eye, part of it reflects off the back of your eye and comes back out. And so it interferes with those light waves that are coming in and the light waves that are coming out, and it's the same thing happens, is at some point those light waves align with each other and they amplify each other, and at some point they oppose each other, so that it turns the light off so that there's nothing there. And so what's happening is that light inside your eye is turning off and on at different points in time. So this is why this has a sort of this textural look when you get up close to it. And it's a very interesting thing, to say the least, to think about light, and you're really looking at light in the realm of the photon instead of how we normally experience it. And so the world of making holograms is very much in the realm of the photon. So in the person, Dennis Gabor, who developed the theory of holography, did that in 1947. And it wasn't until 1962 that the theory was proved until lasers were invented, because there was no source of a single frequency light form. And so he won the Nobel Prize for it, and it's still one of the most, to me, one of the most beautiful and interesting, revelations in nature is this natural phenomenon of light wave front interference, which is, just a beautiful thing. Because there's just waves all over the place, that we experience in the ocean, whatever. They're just different frequencies that we deal with. So in 1965, an artist named Bruce Nauman, he's actually lives in Galisteo, very well-known artist. He was really the first artist to really work with holography in terms of, known artist, I should say, had a reputation at that point in time to work with holography and do something. So he made a series of holograms called Making Faces. And so 3 or 4 years ago, I sort of put forth this hypothesis that when these holograms were made, laser light has such a high level of ability to hold information that when the holograms were made, his DNA was actually recorded in the hologram, because the laser light went into his skin and then gathered that information and then came back out and then recorded the hologram. And so, the resolution of holograms is quite remarkable. The holograms that I make over here, these are really true holograms. They're not a digitally based hologram at all. It's a total analog system, and there's about 1 billion or more pixels per inch if you could, digitize it so that you could understand the pixels. So they're extremely high resolution of information. And so it's looking at the scientific numbers, it's quite possible that his DNA is in those holograms. And so it's, we'll see what happens. Maybe in 1,000 years, we'll be able to read that DNA when science advances, or maybe not. We'll see. But anyway, the holograms that I produce, basically, I expose them. It's somewhat like a photo sensitive process, and they're exposed with laser light. And what is left behind after you expose it with laser light and process it somewhat like a photograph, it's a photographic process, is it creates a little nanoterrain of gelatin, little hills and valleys. And those hills and valleys are the dimensions of light waves. So nature does this all over the place. The blue morpho butterfly on the left is one of those things. They're this brilliant blue. I don't know if you've ever seen one, but that's all basically just light hitting this nanostructure on the butterfly wings and breaking it up. And this is on the right is basically a photograph of those scales. It's a different type of butterfly, but many, many butterflies use this method of creating color. And it's basically what's happening is the white light comes down and hits the structure that exists on the scales and selects out the different frequencies. The blue morpho selects out the blue light, and it lets all the other frequencies pass through. So that's why you get these brilliant iridescent colors. And the holograms that I make do the same thing. It's there's structural color that produces all of the color that are in my pieces. And so because of that, I have a wide range of palette that's really not available to painters. And because like with paint, if you mix orange and blue, you get brown. Well, if I mix orange and blue with additive spectral colors, I get white. And so I have a very different palette that I can work with. And it's to me, very enchanting palette. I always love it when I see, a bluebird or a hummingbird or something like that, and you see these amazing colors on them. And it's just a real joy and different way of looking at how we experience light in our environment. So here we have, hummingbird on the left with the sort of a magenta tail feathers. That's all structural color. The neck red is also a structural color. And peacock feathers, of course. Opals do this, react to light in the same way. They're basically little spheres of silica that form the opal. And depending on the size of the sphere of the silica in the structure of the opal, that determines what color comes back. So if you're, the larger the sphere, the longer wavelength of color you'll get into the reds and yellows and things like that. And the blue opals, those spheres are smaller inside the opal. And so that's what determines the color, is just the structure of those little microspheres that are inside the opal. So here we are with a galaxy. So light, what we know of the universe is through light. Basically, all of the information we know about the universe is really derived from how we understand physics, but really what we see in what the light is carrying with it in time. And so, when we look at a galaxy, we're looking at a galaxy that is, 10 million light years away. So we're seeing what was going on in that a galaxy 10 million light years ago. So when I make a hologram, it is actually recording what happened during that period of that exposure. And so the light comes down when you replay the hologram and illuminate it, that light comes down and hits the hologram and is basically reconstructed by the hologram and coming back to you in that form of what happened in time whenever that hologram was made. So in one sense, the holograms can record time. And I don't know of anything else on the planet that actually records time, which is sort of an interesting thing. But it opens up a whole world to me of thinking about our relationship to time and our relationship to the universe and all of the information that that light holds. And, you know, waveforms appear everywhere in nature. So that's one of our blessings. I'm an ex-surfer. I wish I was a surfer. You have to surf more than 10 times a year to really be called a surfer. But I do kiteboard at this point, so I still get into the water and play in the waves. So when I was, probably in my early teens, 12 years old, my mother took me to New York, and we went to see MoMA, and that's where I saw Guernica, which was the last image, the Picasso image. This is Monet's Water Lilies, and this is a Cy Twombly piece. And I especially remember the Guernica Picasso piece from that point in my life, and I said, this is what I want to do. I want to create, I want to do something. And so I really got very involved in art at that point in time, more independently, but I also was interested in science. So when I ended up in college, I was studying art and studying astronomy and physics. And so it's sort of an interesting combination to do those things. And they really relate so much. You know, the world of the scientists and the world of the artists are so similar in terms of how their mind operates and how they go through patterns of thought and create patterns of understanding in their reality and come up with new ideas and new excitement things, new things in their life that are very exciting. I often wake up in the middle of the night with ideas, and as my wife knows, that's always a little difficult because I wake her up. So these were two very influential artists for me. This is Robert Irwin on the left, and this is Larry Bell on the right. And this Irwin piece on the left it's a really amazing thing. I have never seen them. He did a series of these pieces, but I've read about them, and they're basically these sort of dome sphere-like shapes that are mounted on the wall, and they blend into the wall, and so you can't tell where the edges are, but you can feel that there's a dimensional quality to them. And, you know, I would love to see one at some point in time, but they're not shown very often. Larry Bell on the right, in 1974, I was in Houston, Texas, and he had an exhibition at the museum there, and it was this outside exhibition, these little pieces of glass that were in the patio. And I saw this, and I just stayed there for more than an hour just looking at how sun reacted with the light, and it really got me very interested in glass as a material to work with. And so that was before I had seen a hologram, but I started really thinking about optics and studying optics at that point in time. And so these are a series of things I've been working with. They are basically photographs of laser light interference. And so each one of the dark areas and fields are sort of waveforms. That is where the light interacts with itself and amplifies and creates a peak. And the white areas are where the laser light has reacted in a way so that it cancels itself out. And so it creates these beautiful patterns. And, you know, really what all I'm doing is putting things in the path of the laser light and seeing how the laser light reacts through the edges and different angles of whatever I put in front of the laser light. And here's another one. This is the color of the laser I've been using to do it. And, you know, when you put these on the wall and they're 6 feet across or 7 feet across, you can just see this beautiful texture in it. And the photograph doesn't really pick it up as nicely as when you see them in laser light, but I really enjoy it quite a bit. So there's these wave patterns everywhere in nature. So this is a photograph of the polar area of Mars. And these are sand dunes that exist in that area with snow. And so you can see the waveforms that are so similar to the waveforms that are in those laser diffraction, photographs that I just showed you. And so, we're surrounded in this world of wave interference and waveform interference, and it's really wonderful for me to really see this, and it's really, through the years, it's really sort of opened up my eyes to nature and how it works in terms of waveform. So this is what's called a Michelson interferometer, and what it is, what you do is you take a little laser right here and you shoot it into a beam splitter, and it splits off the beam here and hits a mirror and reflects back through the beam itself, just where it hits the beam splitter, and then another part of the beam goes through and it reflects right back to that same point. And so what you're doing is actually interfering two separate laser beams with itself, and then what comes out here is an interaction of that wavefront activity. So this next little video is of the interferometer that I produced. So the lasers come out here, it comes across my studio onto this large table, and these round discs, those are all the beam splitters that I'm splitting the 3 laser beams up into, and then here's one that goes through, you can see that mirror, and it's coming back through the beam splitter again, and that's the resulting sort of interaction of where those beams are overlapping. And it creates all sorts of very interesting forms, and they're just, I just love looking at interferometry, because you're interacting these waveforms with themselves. So these interferometers are used for very, very fine measurements, because you're working in the realm of the photon. So scientifically, if you set up a Michelson interferometer on a very large scale, you can detect gravity waves, and that's how they were actually detected, because there's a detector up in Washington and there's another one in Louisiana, and they compared the 2 findings at the same moment, and the legs of the interferometer are kilometers in length, and so it could measure these like minute little movements of the Earth structure, the crust, and detect gravity waves. And they've also, through these, LIGO is the name of the group, the apparatus that produce these things. And they built this first one in Seattle, not in Seattle. It's in Washington. It's in sort of eastern Washington, and probably about 15, 20 years ago, they realized that there are tectonic tidal movements that take place on the land. So it's just not the ocean that has tidal effect. There's also a tidal effect with land. And so basically the continents move about a centimeter every 24 hours back and forth over about a 3-kilometer distance. And so that's why a lot of the Earth settles as it sets, because it's getting this like little minor, photonic level of movement back and forth every 24 hours. And so it's a very interesting thing to be able to measure these things, and it's all because of laser light, because of that wave interference. So here is some laser play that we were just doing in my studio a few days ago, and behind, don't do this with lasers. They can be very dangerous. There's a lot of energy in them, but we were very careful, and basically why I want to show you this photograph is there's a very large mirror right here, and it's a concave mirror. It's about 5 feet across, and I actually got this from Grumman Aircraft. They used to use this to make holograms for heads-up displays, which are display in jet fighters, so that the pilot can read the information that they needed and it's projected about 50 feet out in front of the aircraft, so the pilot doesn't have to change his focal vision to see what's going on, because everything's happening so fast. They don't want to, they didn't want the pilots to look down at the control panel and change their focus and then look up again. So it was really an interesting thing that they really did a lot of development with. There's, they're starting to use these in cars now, heads-up displays, so that you can see it. But this next video, I basically is a little video of going through my studio, and at the last part of the video, I go up to this mirror and I take my camera and I go through the focal point of the mirror, and you can sort of see what this thing does. It's a really weird thing. Oh, actually, not the next one. So this is where we start with making the holograms. I'm coating the emulsion onto glass, which is what I make the holograms on. So this is a liquid emulsion, and this is a close friend of mine, Dora Toss from Italy, and she's spreading the emulsion onto the glass, and you try to get it on there without any bubbles. And it's in a somewhat of a clean room hood, so it's a clean, HEPA filters are going into this area, so there's very little dust that can form onto the emulsions. You coat it on there, and then this is a big piece of glass, so I helped her put it on to this turntable we have. And so you have to put it very precisely onto the turntable, because it turns at about 120 RPM. So you've got this big heavy piece of glass that's spinning fairly quickly. Twice it has flown off because I haven't quite gotten it in the center correctly, and so it just sort of took out the whole little wall that's around the thing. It's like, okay, we're done for the day, no more coating. But that's how you do it. And so basically that emulsion that's on the glass is about as thick as a piece of cellophane plastic. It's very thin. It's 25 to 35 microns, sort of depending on how thick the emulsion is. So a lot of the colors that I derive in my holograms are determined by the formulas that I mix for the emulsion. A thicker emulsion creates a interaction with light that responds to a little longer wavelengths. So if I want to have red or orange in the holograms, it's a thicker emulsion, and it has a little different formula too, so that the little nano structures that are in the gelatin after I make the hologram are larger. And so those larger nanostructures will reflect warmer frequencies of light, red light, yellow light. For all the blues, basically, it's a thinner emulsion, and the resulting structures are much smaller in terms of the realm of the photon. In terms of our realm, there's hardly any difference at all. But they're much smaller, and so they'll reflect the blue frequencies of light. And so those are the determining factors in how I am able to control the color somewhat. The emulsion I use is also very sensitive to time and humidity. So after we coat the emulsions, we have to age it a certain amount of time and to get the colors I want. It lasts, depending on what time of year. Now it'll last 10 days, 2 weeks. In the summertime, it's 2 days, 3 days. So when we coat the emulsion, we have to make the holograms really quickly. That's one of the reasons I have my studio here, is because of the low humidity, because it's especially sensitive to humidity. And so I'm able to really have a much better idea of where it's aging and not really have to have a lot of controls and dehumidifiers going all the time in my studio to take the water out. I've got a sort of a good friend student in San Francisco, and he's always struggling with humidity. So he watches the weather really closely to see how humid it is, and he has dehumidifiers and a dehumidifying chamber that he can keep the emulsions in so that they don't age quickly. So here's a little, this is a table that I make the holograms on. And it's about 7 by 14 feet. It weighs about 14,000 pounds. And the reason it's basically isolated from any vibrations in the ground. It floats on inner tubes to help it isolate those vibrations. Because when I'm making holograms, if anything moves more than a 10 billionth of an inch, you don't get a hologram at all, because those waveforms go out of phase, and it's not like a photograph that it goes out of focus. It just goes out of phase and it doesn't exist anymore. So it's either in phase or it's gone. Now it's an interesting area sometimes when you get a hologram that's right on the edge of that in phase interaction. You get some really beautiful effects, and you know, I keep them, I use them if I can, because it's recording what happened at that moment in time. That's what happened, and it's like, okay, this wave interference happened, and when you illuminate that hologram with light, you can see the actual, you know, wave front interaction that took place at that moment in time. So, you know, philosophically, it's sort of an interesting thing to work with. So, you know, so this is on the left is where the lasers come onto the table. This is sort of the control zone, and I'm able to, the lasers come onto these mirrors, and I can shoot them up to different mirrors that are over on my mirror tree, and these are all concave mirrors. And what they do is they expand the laser beam so that it illuminates the whole subject matter that I want to make a hologram into laser light. So here's a setup, which is basically this whitish rectangle here is a solid steel rectangle. And it's supported by little steel supports you can sort of maybe see in here. But what's in front of the steel supports are ostrich feathers. And so they sort of shadow those steel supports. And what happens is when the laser light comes down through that piece of glass that's on top of it, the laser light hits those ostrich feathers, and feathers are filled with air. And these are black ostrich feathers. And so what happens is they absorb the light and they start to slightly move. And all they have to do is move a 10 billionth of an inch, and then they go out of phase, so you just don't even see them. So it's a way of really hiding things that I don't want to be in the hologram in a way where I'm working within the realm of the photon at the same time. Because in regular light, they're pretty obvious, but they just disappear. So this piece is called Infinite Bloom, and it's an older piece, and it's part of the Spherical Light series. And it has a lot of color change in it. This one isn't a video, too bad. But you can see the effect right in here. Oops, let me go back real quick. You can see the effect right here of when I coat the emulsion. Sometimes the emulsion doesn't evenly coat the plate, and it's sort of, probably that corner of the glass was a little cooler when I coated it, so it started to get to gel up. And it was so beautiful though, because what happens is it's a little thicker right there, so you get like this, you don't really see it in this photograph, but you get this color change that goes across this little mountain of gelatin that's in the piece. And also it puts the hand of the human into some aspect of the work. So in my early days of making holograms, I was basically a jeweler when I got into it, and I'm a sculptor. And so I was making very pictorial little sculptures. This piece is about 2 inches by about 3 inches tall. And so these are little miniature sculptures that I made, and I'd carve them in wax and then cast them in silver, and then make these small little pieces. And right before I found holography, I was sort of making these little miniature sculptures. I was living in New York, and they were spending lots of time on them, and I couldn't sell them to anybody because I would spend a week or two on one little piece, and no one really wanted to pay more than $100 for it because it was only this big. So, but then I said, oh wow, I can make holograms of these things, and it sort of really fit into my whole realm of what I really loved anyway, which is the color and the light and the beauty of what light can be. And so then in early 90s, I got very involved in bigger glass sculptural pieces. So this piece is about 18, 20 inches tall, and it has 9 different layers of holograms in it that are laminated one on top of another. And so this is a little detail on the right side, but it had all of these different planes of this sort of checkerboard floor going back in and talking about depth and dimension. There's another glass sculpture on the left. Name of this one is Internal Reflections, and the one on the right is a tidal pool series. And so I was selling this work in glass galleries in 1995 or so, and then I started thinking about the atmosphere again and started looking at all of these different forms that are available to us in the atmosphere. And I had an experience on top of a mountain actually at one point in time where I was seeing 2 or 3 of these different forms in the sky at the same time. And I started thinking about what I really wanted to do was not make pictorial holograms and little stories about light, that people could relate to, because I was often getting the question if I could make a hologram of their dog or their cat. And it was like, that's not what I want you to understand more about light. And so I said, I have to really start looking at the subject matter that really talks about light and leaves the pictorial behind and starts to enchant people with just what light is and who light is, to really understand light in a deeper way. So I started, there we go. So this is the Halo series. So this is a fairly newer piece in the Halo series. I did this in 2016. And it's called We the People, and it has basically the preamble to the Constitution sandblasted in the back of the piece. It's filled with luminescent pigment, and it's in Spanish and in Farsi. And I made this piece when Trump was running for president in 2016 because I was worried about what was going on with the understanding of what We the People is all about. So this piece right over here is also part of that series, the Halo series. So what happens with the Halo series, can we get some lights going? So if you put multiple light sources on a hologram, you'll get a whole nother hologram visually inside of it. And so holograms, there's a relationship with the light source, the hologram, and you. So they're, in a sense, they're all about relationships. So, after we're done, we can sort of get these lights going off and on a little bit again, because it's really beautiful, the forms that can be created. So you can get an idea of this We the People piece, and this on the right side is with 3 different light sources on it. So for every light source, you basically, with one light source, this had 2 rings. The photograph on the right side is 3 rings that are sort of, the light sources are offset, so you sort of get this structure that is, can be very beautiful in terms of where you place the lights, and just in terms of the mandala of light and the interest of how we perceive. So this is Solera Torah. Terra Solaris is the name of this piece. And I started working with different simple forms when I started working with the Halo series. And this is just a rectangle. And this rectangle floats out in space, out in front of the holographic piece itself. And it's out in space about 7 inches, 8 inches out in front of it. And there's one of the very first pieces I did with this series is in the back corner here. And so what's interesting to do with this series, which is the acceleration series, which sort of came out of how we have to really accelerate our consciousness to keep up with technology and how it's accelerating, because technology is accelerating at a really quick, fast speed. Look at AI, what's going on with that right now, and can we conceptually understand what's really going on? So what's interesting to do with these pieces is to really walk into that rectangle of light in space. And part of it is the hologram, for me, has the ability to sort of materialize light into a tangible, tactile, interface, so that you can experience it, you can walk into it, you can see how it. If you get in front of it, it'll illuminate your face, and your whole face will turn blue from the light, and you're in that veil of light, and it's a really interesting an experience, and it's sort of you could say a wonderment experience. It's like, what's going on here? And it's something that I feel we have to do, is to have these experiences in this time so that we can accelerate our consciousness, so that we can see where we have to go, what we have to do. So this piece is Trace of the Traceless. It's a very minimal piece. It's part of the Spherical Light series. And as you move around it, it goes through a lot of color change. And that little strip of lighter color in the center of it is photoluminescent pigment that is in behind the hologram. And I have a video of it with that also, but I couldn't find it, so I apologize. But it's really sort of beautiful, because you can have the piece hanging and have the light on it for a couple hours in the evening, and you turn the light off, and you have this strip that glows for about an hour, hour and a half, and it's a very deep blue, sort of long, short wavelength blue that glows, and it's sort of it's an enchanting way to experience light in a very different way. So this is also an acceleration piece. This is acceleration number 4. There we go. And you can really see, as these two planes of light pass over each other, how the colors mix, and with additive palette, how they create two different colors. So this is sort of a green and sort of an orange passing over each other, and you can see when they pass each over, it gets white. With video and photographic processes, you really don't have, it doesn't have much as a dynamic feel as it does actually looking at the hologram. So I really like to, that's why one reason all these holograms are here, so you can really experience it, because seeing holograms in the real sense is really important, because then you really get to be involved in it and sort of understand what's going on and experience the wonder of light and space and what's going on. So I've recently considered not even documenting my pieces anymore photographically, just because it's Robert Irwin, the artist who did those sphere pieces. He never would allow people to take photographs of his work at all. You had to experience the work. It was all about the experience. And holograms are sort of the same way. It's really about the experience that you can really start to be involved and create the relationship with the light and the hologram and yourself, and move around it and see what happens. This piece is acceleration number 9. What I've done here is, there we go. What I've done here is, this is actually 3 holograms laminated together, and I've carved away some of the emulsion in one layer to sort of reveal the layer beyond it. So you have this blue one moving out to the right is one of the layers, and I've carved away the emulsion in one of the layers so that you have colors coming from the one behind it or the one in front of it, sort of intermixing with the geometry of how I carved the emulsion away. So this next piece is spherical light piece. This is a very flat hologram. It really doesn't have much dimension at all. And it sort of came about because I was working with trying to make a hologram that was totally flat. That didn't have any depth at all. So I basically just had a white piece of glass and had the hologram right here. So there was no real physical depth that you could perceive. And the first one I made sort of like changed the whole way I started looking at light, because it became apparent that light is really spherical in its nature, and that light leaves a point of origin and it spreads out as a sphere. And so with this piece, as you move from left to right, it really changes color really dynamically, I think. Nope, we don't want to go there. We want to go here. Let's try it again. Well, this one's not working. So anyway, as you move left to right, this goes from like, it's turquoise on one side and orange on the other side. And it goes through all these color changes. And it's really, far more dynamic than the video would show. But this one is sort of the same family. So we should be able to get, there we go. So this one also has luminescent pigment in it. This is basically the title of this one is 0 + 1 nanosecond. And it's sort of referencing the Big Bang. And so as you move from this side, it's definitely, has a whole different color characteristic. And as you move across it, it's really changing color quite a bit. When I coated the emulsion, I basically put a lot of bubbles into the emulsion, and so that's what that whole splatter form is all sort of, it's a texture inside the emulsion or on the emulsion. And then when I made the hologram, I just basically put that on a white surface. And so it created all of those, imperfections, you could say, in the emulsion, created shadows on that white surface. So in that piece, those shadows are out in front of that hologram about 5 inches. And so you have these shadows that are sort of creating this cloud of space in front of those colors. It's a very interesting piece. And there's a piece over here that sort of has the same effect right in the center, and that's also another splatter piece. And as you move around, you can sort of see the dynamics of how the color changes in the texture of that emulsion. This piece is a what's the name of it? Elysium, that's right. And it is that little slice in the center of it is just a slice of a orange line that comes down. Nope. Let's try it again. No. So anyway, what happens with this one is that there's this orange plane that sticks out from that little slit. And so when you get just in the right place right in front of it, you have a plane of light that is sticking out from the hologram about that far. And then as you move past it, it sort of recedes back and goes into nothingness, because you can't, as it moves, because it moves inside of that slit, you still see the color of the hologram, but the orange line disappears. Oh no, that's okay. Let's try that. That might. Yeah, click it, yeah. Well, maybe we can, let's see if I can do this. Yeah, so we can do an animation. So this is from one side what the piece looks like. Oh, there it goes. So you can sort of see that line of, or that form of light coming out from the center, and as you move across it, it's going to disappear here in just a second. But it's sort of a very interesting thing that it comes out, and you have to be really just in the right place to see it. So let's see if we can do this with this one, because it says it's working. There we go. Okay. So you can see that it's, you know, very turquoise from this side, and it is stopped. Oh well, you have to believe me. That one goes through an amazing color change, you know, and it's all structural color. So, you know, basically what you have is you have this structure of color that's in the emulsion. I mean, a structure of gelatin that's in the emulsion, and it sort of acts like a Venetian blind. So as you're from one side, it's slightly twisted. So from one side, the Venetian blind gets closer together. So it's reflecting blue frequencies of light. And then as you move across it and go to the other side, you're sort of looking at the Venetian blind, but it's more open. So you're seeing it's reflecting warmer frequencies of light. So it's something that I sort of figured out, you know, that is, in a sense, breaking the rules of how holographers make holograms, because I'm shifting what's called the reference angle of making the hologram. Okay, so let's see if we can get back to... Okay, this one is fluent flux, and basically, we'll see if it works. No, it's not working. Sorry about this. Here we go. Maybe that works. Okay. We'll talk about this one. So you can see on this is basically, this blue ring is a Halo's hologram. So it's just a circle that's you know, exists in the hologram, and it's a very narrow piece. So it's, if I were to just not do anything to the glass, you would cut that circle off. But what I did, it was made on very thick glass, and then I put a lens on the edges of the glass. And so it's bending the light as it enters the hologram, and it's creating sort of this optical effect of narrowing and focusing the hologram. So we'll see if we can get this one to work. Okay. There we go. Okay. So this is a piece. This is part of the Fugue series. This is a Fugue 11, and basically what this is just, it's a piece that I installed with multiple light sources that were phasing off and on. So, you know, as you move around the piece, the lights would, 3 lights would come on, and then it would just go to one light, and so you would get these multiple images in the hologram. And let's just try this one real quick again. No, it doesn't want to do it. Okay, so here's a new series I'm working on that's very minimal. So this blue square projects about 5 or 6 inches off the surface of the glass. And what I've done is put black semi-transparent glass behind it, and then I shape the glass on the back so that it's semi-luminescent. So basically what you have is this shadow right here, the light's coming through and sort of creating this really soft shadow around the piece. And you can sort of see up in the corner how it's sort of allowing the light to come through, you know, from behind it. And so it really, you know, physically creates a very interesting space with just the physicality of the glass. And then you have this very simple square that's floating out in front of it. And these pieces, they're very minimal, very simple, but they're very, very beautiful. I really like them quite a bit. So this is a piece called Borrowing Light for Those Who Need Nothing. And it's a piece that I had up in Santa Fe a few years ago. And basically, I made 85 of these holograms. And this was outside at Current's New Media Festival. And I was out there the whole time talking with people. And it was sort of an invitation for people to borrow the holograms. You know, and so we got talking, and then, you know, we started talking, and people would ask, well, what is the, I don't really understand this title, what's Borrowing Light? And I say, well, you can borrow these, you can't own them, but you can take one, and you can play with it for a while, and they'll sort of help you to understand how light works, how the universe works, but then you have to pass it on to somebody else. And it's interesting because, you know, since this piece was up 5 or 6 years ago, I've run into a lot of people, some friends, some I don't even know, who meet me and they said, oh yeah, you know, I got one of those pieces, but I know I had to give it away. You know, and it was great to see that go on. And so, you know, they talked about it, and, you know, when they gave it away, they had to tell that person that, yes, you can hold on to it for a while, but you have to pass it on, and so that other people can really enjoy it. And this piece is called Bathing in Ether. And let's see if we can get it going. And it's not working. So you can get the sense of it. So basically you can see that this is another piece where I have 3 holograms laminated on top of, oops, not even, well, you can't even see it. There we go, okay. So that's good. So you can see, like, what I've done is carve away the emulsion, you know, here, this piece of glass has got this emulsion, this emulsion, this emulsion, and this emulsion. And that's it, I've carved away all the rest. And so those little forms sort of interact with the 2 rectangles behind it, and I've actually carved away a little bit of the rectangles behind it too. So you get all this color mixing. Like this carving right here is carved away from this sort of pink emulsion. And as you move past it, you see this green hologram of a rectangle behind it. So as you move around, this piece has got all these, you know, multiple layers of dimension that are moving across each other and color mixing. And this is part of the acceleration series, that we have to accelerate the way we are looking at things. And hopefully we can accelerate our consciousness, and we can move further on, you know, using light, which is what I would like to see people do, is experience my work and really sort of get involved in the wonderment of what it is. And we're done. So enjoy the holograms, experience them, especially the end one. Walk into that veil of light that exists there, and you can go through that veil, and it sort of does something to your brain. It still does it to me, and it's always something when people see my work and they do that for the first time. They just sort of are a little mystified. You know, the piece right next to it, just left of it, has a little hidden treasure behind the holograms, but you have to move all the way around it to really see the treasure. And it's also you know, embedded with luminescent pigment, so when the lights get turned off, it'll glow in the dark for, you know, an hour or so. This piece right over here is a brand new piece that I just finished up a little while ago. I'm going to be pursuing more of this because it sort of sparks something in me. This piece is the title of this is Shadow and Light, and it was made from a piece of glass that I shaped and formed that was dark glass and then clear glass on it, so it allowed a sort of semi-transparent shadow to go onto the white background, and it did this strange thing because when I was looking at it, it looked one way, and when I made the hologram of it, it totally changed everything because that shape was sort of a lens shape, and it acted as a lens, and so it basically focused the light in the center and created a dark edge where I had made the edges really thin so that I was trying to let the light pass through. And it's sort of like this discovery that, you know, you have an expectation of what it's going to do, and when you make a hologram of it, it's totally different.
Well, you know, usually do a Q&A afterwards, but it's also, we have like incredible holograms in the room, so maybe we could just spend some time, look at some holograms, and August is going to be here.
And talk about them. I'll be over there talking about it. So.
But thank you so much for coming. We do the August round of applause.
Thank you, thank you.
And we got some snacks and some drinks in the hallway, and if you need anything or have questions, please reach out and ask. Thanks.
Really?
Such a wonderful talk. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
well, sure, thanks. Thanks. A little technical difficulty there. It was like, bummer, you know. It's okay. This is better to experience this.
You can see them, in real life. So.
Yeah.
By the way, you did like offer me to come coat some glasses with you sometime. If
You
that's
can do
okay,
that.
I'm gonna
Sure. You can do that.
Okay, I'll send you an email. I have your email address.
Yeah. No, we're gonna, you know, basically the Vlada Museum up in Santa Fe wants me to do a workshop at some point in time. And so I'm waiting for, there's this emulsion that's available out in the world, but it's hard to get at this point in time. But it's sort of like Polaroid emulsion, so you don't have to do any processing. It sort of just self-processes as you make the hologram.
Interesting.
So it's